the first thing that our mutual friend Pierre wanted me to ask you about was the experience of returning to performing, after the pandemic. How's the experience been?
Well, of course, for all of us, everybody, the pandemic was something not only unexpected but never lived before. On my side, very strangely, I was, in a way, I must admit, one of the lucky people to be, in a way, it was a time where I don't. Well, I mean, so many people suffered from this period, but true enough that you always have to find, even if the most difficult time, a way to turn that positively. And the fact of being just able to stay in one place for more than a week was something I've never experimented since almost the last 15 years. Therefore, I was in a way rather happy with the, let's say, the three, 4 first weeks, listening to absolutely non-classical music. I had a big box of all the Miles Davis Columbia recordings, 53 of them, which I listened one by one. Very interesting to see the evolution of such an artist. And I have this hobby, which is little model trains. So, just able to immerse yourself in your hobby and not caring of taking care of, going to the airport and changing flights and all this. So that was actually rather, let's say, I mean, unusual, but not totally unpleasant, I must have admit, although I'm very consider the fact that for some people it was really a terrible disaster. I mean, purely economic to start with, and some of our dear freelance musicians. I'm now talking to you from London, and so many of these incredible musicians were jobless and were in very difficult time. So, of course, you had to consider that as well. And then came the frustration, of course, of having to play, but the concerts were cancelled and blah, 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 and all the things. You hoped you will be able to go to Japan, and then Japan closed. You hope you will be able to Australia, and then Australia closed, and so on and so on. So that created quite an impact of your motivation, so to speak. But I didn't do any concert live from home or this. That was not really my thing. I'm turning 60 now, so technology and communicating with all this media is not something I'm terribly involved with. But I respect very much some of my colleagues and gave a concert every day. Good for them. I was happy not to be away of the piano. I must tell you, yes. And then coming back, yes, true enough that you probably apprehend the entire concert ritual a little bit differently since, yes, the fact of appreciating even more the sharing aspect of a music live and people listening with attention. I think it changed also from the audience point of view, with people probably even more realizing this magical moment we are experimenting all together, the musicians on stage, the audiences. I remember Pierre Boulez telling me, every concert is an absolute miracle. And he said the worst as the best can happen at any given time in a concert. Well, true enough that this is probably even more palpable now. And I hope it will stay like this. It's nice for any performing art. I think we feel somehow on the other side finally.
Yeah, I think that there's a tremendous appreciation among audiences just to be able to go to a concert now. Maybe audiences are better able to really appreciate just what you're talking about, just being there for live music. You know?
But a great concert is always a combination of wonderful music, played with inspiration, but also listening well. If the audience is not attuned to what you do, it might take away a little bit of your inspiration. The exact same way you are listening to me now, you are paying attention to what I say. So I'm paying even more attention to what I say, because I can see you are connected to me. If you were looking around and maybe in sort of watch, and you see, then it's a kind of question of communication and rapport of communication. But the great concert is also is always a kind of osmose. Ideally, an osmose with the acoustic. The acoustic of the whole is very important. Acoustic, the music played, and a receptive audience, and an inspired people on stage. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very, very good point. Yeah, here in New York, of course, we're looking forward to going into the new concert hall for the Philharmonic. I haven't been there yet, but in the next few weeks we'll get to something. So we'll hope the acoustic is good. We'll see.
Of course, we hope to.
So let me ask too. I've spent the last few weeks listening to your Haydn recordings, which are, just fabulous. They're really, to look for a big revelation from Haydn is a surprise in the first place, and it's obviously because we've not given Franz Joseph enough credit for what he was, But I wanted to ask, you recorded the Haydn recordings over a period of about 13, 14 years. Is that right for Chandos?
Yeah, I thought it was 11, but that's very possible. It's maybe there were, no, you're right. It's more than, because we did 11 CDs. But I think for 2 years, I didn't record it because I was recording at the same time the Beethoven sonatas. And as much as it helped me somehow to have the two integral parallel at the beginning, at one point, Beethoven takes another direction, and deal with much bigger phrases and much expand sound world. And to go back to miniature of Haydn and was actually a little bit incompatible. So I left Haydn for a while and continue and finish the Beethoven series. And when the Beethoven series was done, then I start again. So it's probably 13 years, yes.
So what is that like? Because also you're playing all kinds of other works too. You go away, you play, a more romantic later concerto or something, and then come back and revisit Haydn. So what's that like as a creative process, to go away and come back?
Well, it's quite unexplainable, but there are some composers where you feel at home, and you don't need so much to work on yourself in order to pretend to be to make justice to their music. It's always you always pretend, because as I say as a joke, I never receive any phone calls from Haydn saying you understood me, that you made a good job. So you always assume. But on the other hand, what I want to say is that there are other composers where actually you need to work a lot on your sensitivity, on your sensibility, on your touch, on your music making, in order to be together with them. We are a little bit like actors, There are some characters that I think a great actor should be able to play any characters. But of course, there are characters that fits more his or her personality than others. But for the other character, the actor needs to work a lot. on his technique of diction, on his technique of moving, on his technique of behavior. So, and for us musicians, it's exactly the same. And therefore, for me, don't ask me exactly why, but Haydn, let's say from the first time I was acquainted to his style, somehow there were a click. Somehow I understood him. Of course, 30 years ago, I didn't have the full picture I have now of his output. Certainly not. Even 40 years ago. But I remember kind of revelation type of experience, like a concert with Sviatoslav Richter back in, that was 83, 84, maybe 84, maybe 85, in France, in La Grange de Melay, where he played 4 Haydn sonatas in one concert. And many of us thought, well, you don't do a program with only 4 Haydn sonatas. It's like 4 amuse-bouche. You know, where is the main course? Where is that? And the revelation was that after the concert, we were totally fed. We were totally overwhelmed, and we had the impression to have experimented 200 years of music. And the music gesture, the innovation, the diversity of the music gestures, of the vocabulary that Richter could bring out from these little Haydn sonatas was amazing. I said, wow, everything is there. Prokofiev, Schumann, Brahms, Scriabin, Chopin, Beethoven, of course, and Mozart. That comes without saying. But you know, it went on, and it was a real shock for me. And somehow that was the music. You know, you sometimes put Haydn, Mozart, Beethoven in the same basket, and of course they have a lot of things in common, as all the composers who lived in the same time, in the same period, and in the same time, and in the same place, or roughly geographically the same place. Nevertheless, they all had some very particularity of style and grammar. They have each of them have a very specific grammar. And the one of Haydn somehow was close to my sensitivity. I love the humor of his music, the wit, he's a very nervous composer, if I may say, by nervous, not by being extra agitated, but he always works with a very, very fast reflex, or actually non-reflex. He also plays with he plays tricks with your brain. He makes you expecting that he's going to be in one direction, and actually he goes in another direction. Right. And all these poses that he has in his music, I found it really fascinating. And actually later on, much later, probably only 5 or 6 years ago, I started to see them actually as a double meaning. They are not only posed to make effect on, you think I'm going to do this, but I'm do that, but also like a funny, humoristic kind of effect. But also they have a much more profound one, which is this all these activities, all this excitement might be in vain, and there is a moment of reflection, of looking back and say, what did I just do? Was it really necessary? Or, and say, shall I move on or not? This or not is crucial. And then sometimes Haydn said, okay, let's move on. And sometimes he says, no, I go somewhere. And also, you cannot resume Haydn only on his humor, although that's an enormous part of his style. He was actually, as I understand, not blamed, but he was criticized by that, because humor was not something that was supposed to be in great art. Right. Great arts were, that time was supposed to elevate the soul. And he does that in many places as well. There is a profundity, despite the simplicity of its music. Sometimes just two voices. I mean, very minimalist as a keyboard writer. Sometimes three voices, sometimes chords, but that's very rare. Normally, it's only at the end that he was expanding and write more polyphonic and more substantial structure. But before, even with his very simple two voices, he can create some very profound and moving and touching moments. So I was really very interested by that. Another aspect which I thought was very interesting for me is the liberty this music gives you. Very few indications are in the score, actually. Some of them are written for harpsichord, so forget about the dynamics. Right. Forget about the dynamics. We have roughly a tempo indication, and we have thousands of repeats. Of course, I exaggerate, but with lots of repeats. Mm-hmm. Therefore, it's a little bit up to the interpreter to you have a little bit like a skeleton that you need to embellish, that you need to put clothes on, Mm-hmm. And this aspect of the creativity, of personal creativity in this music, in opposition, for example, to the late Debussy, where each note is written, so specifically with an accent, with a point, with a sostenuto, with all the combinations of them. In the last Debussy pieces, you have up to 7 or 8 different way of touching the key, attacking the key, pressing the key. I mean, even now I was looking at the score of Île Joyeuse, whom I played hundreds of times, and not later than this morning I said, let's have a look at the score. It's so much, and I realized there were indications I forgot, or that means we speak about microscopic details. Anyway, so that's the other side of the spectrum. And in that time, in Haydn times, most was left to the discretion of the interpreter. So that's an exciting side of it.
Yeah, that's very exciting. This might feel free to either answer this question or reject it, but there's a certain expectation, shall we say? I mean, a person who's a French pianist some people sort of think it's going to play Ravel and Debussy, and that will be his specialty, But I remember at a certain point, you and I think it was in the article in the New York Times, you had mentioned hearing Richter play Haydn. And Richter is somebody who I always associated with like a big Russian technique and, a huge volume of sound, but here he's playing Haydn and stuff. So do you think we're getting beyond, are things becoming more international with people being able to play?
No, as I said about great actors and great pianists, the way Richter played Debussy is enormous. Actually, my greatest inspiration in Debussy's were Gieseking, who is German, Friedrich Gulda, Austrian, Zoltán Kocsis, Hungarian, and Richter, Russian. So, and when you were mentioning at the beginning, you said French pianists playing Debussy and Ravel. For me, these two composers are years light apart. Yes, I do feel French still now, playing and recording Ravel. Yes, I feel my French passport. But Debussy, I never felt French in playing Debussy. Debussy was a composer I had tremendous difficulty to get in, and to get in order to understand his sound world, to understand his grammar we were referring to earlier, how he deals with time and his musical way of thinking. It took me a great deal great deal. Actually, it's a music I was not so much interested in at the beginning of my studies. I was much more interested in the music of Prokofiev or Bartók. You know, that was where, I mean, no wonder my wife since 40 years is Hungarian, and I feel so close to so many Hungarian musicians. By the way, I'm speaking to you now from the house of Maestro Solti in London. So, and that's on this exact same piano where I had so many wonderful lessons on Mozart and on Beethoven with him. So that's the music I was close to. So international, I don't know, you will always have a kind of national sensibility. I would put it that way. You know, yes, you can maybe have let's say an accent when you speak, you know, when Australian people speak English, when English people speak English, when you speak English, and when I speak English, it's the same language, but it's not the same accent.
Sure.
So we might have that in the playing, but what I try as an interpreter is, and again I refer to the world of actors, is to be able to fit in the costume or the character of the essence of the music, and therefore adapt your touch, your style, your way you deal with rhythm, you breathe, the way you deal with oppositions of ideas, and so that the text is understandable and enjoyable, and at the same time characterized, stylistically characterized.
Mm-hmm. No, that's wonderful. Thank you. Thanks for the answer. What are your new projects? New concerts, new recordings?
I'm very happy you asked, because I just finished 2 days ago CD of the music of my very dear teacher, Pierre Sancan. Now, Pierre Sancan in the 50s was a French musician of really enormous envergure and scope. As a performer, you can still hear his wonderful recording of some French pieces like the Debussy Preludes or the Ravel Sonatine. But I think his Papillon of Schumann is absolutely exquisite. It's one of the very, very best to me. And the Ravel concertos, of course, some Mozart concertos as well. So he was a great pianist. He was a great composer because he was a Grand Prix de Rome of composition, the famous prize that Ravel failed 5 times. Right. And was fully equipped as an orchestrator and as a composer. And also Charles Munch asked him to be his assistant as a conductor. Now, all of this was flourishing to a point where I still don't know why. He stopped all this. He stopped composing, he stopped playing, he stopped conducting, and dedicated his life to teaching, to piano teaching. Was it a problem at his hands? Was it a psychological problem? I could never know. And of course, when I was his student, never had the chance to discuss that with him. He was a man of grand class. He was a man of like a grand seigneur type of man, very rather tall, very good-looking man, and with an enormous charm and kindness, great generosity, and his piano lessons were revelatory in many aspects. He was one of the very first to see piano playing as a whole, not only from here to here and just moving fingers as it was taught in the French Conservatoire by the Jeux Perlé, which of course had some wonderful results, but also some limitations. And his first students like Jean-Bernard Pommier, Jean-Philippe Collin, Michel Béroff, were the first French pianists to embrace the heavy Russian repertoire. The Prokofiev concertos by Michel Béroff are wonderful. I think Jean-Bernard Pommier was the first pianist to perform Bartók's second concerto, and so on and so forth. So when I was his student, believe it or not, he never mentioned his music. But he was very open-minded, and many times we start the lesson with an improvisation of jazz, which was totally banned at that time of the Paris Conservatoire. You play 2 chords of jazz, and the professor next door tell you, "Don't do that here. You put dirt in your soul." Yeah, all these kind of incredible things. Anyway, Sancan was the absolute opposite of that, and he was a great improviser. And I remember hearing him playing something which I was wonderful, and say, "Oh yeah, that's my toccata." I said, "Oh, okay, good." But he never said, "Well, try." No, never. So he passed away in 2008 after a very sad last 15 years of his life with Alzheimer's disease.
Boy.
And much later, I started, looking at his music and discovered, through the help of the recording of Jean-Philippe Collin, a wonderful piano concerto, fantastic piano concerto, which I played in Asia. And then the flute sonatine he wrote is absolutely gem. Every flutist in the world play that. And so in the recording, there will be the piano concerto, the flute sonatine, some orchestra pieces that my friend Yann-Pascal Tourtellier and the BBC Phil of Manchester, we recorded. And I just finished 2 days ago 4 pieces, including the toccata I was just mentioned. So that's, but we are almost at the last quarter of the complete Mozart concertos with Manchester Camerata and my dear friend Gabor Takács-Nagy. And, another Hungarian founder of the Takács quartet, who was so famous in the 80s, one of the greatest quartet of this century. And of course, Gabor knows all the technique and the ability to bring the best out of the string sections. And we are musical brothers. I mean, we are totally in symbiosis. And so I think we present something. Of course, they are wonderful, and so many recording of the Mozart concertos, even done recently. But somehow, I think what we can present as maybe as a bonus is we spend so much details, so much time on small details in the orchestra, and as it is a small ensemble. And with very devoted and wonderful musicians and great amount of rehearsal time, and recording time, we can present something which is like really one vision with let's say we try not to miss one single opportunity, to make it sound beautiful and exciting, and it's really, I'm very pleased with the result. So,
yeah, it seems as though the level of attention that has to go into preparing and rehearsing a Mozart concerto is possibly greater. I'm thinking of sort of jet set pianists who fly into Chicago and sit down and play a Rachmaninoff or something, and it all, and I don't know whether it's always a question of so much care, but doesn't Mozart really require more minute by minute?
The problem, of course, the paradox is, at the time of Mozart, it was common language. It was their common music making. So they would probably sometimes even not even meet and just play from sight reading. Even we have documents of premiere of Beethoven pieces that had to be stopped in the middle of the piece because it was not rehearsed enough. Right. On the end, I would give a great deal of everything I possess to hear how Mozart played himself and what was the. We can either speculate, either we would be shocked by the luck of rehearsing or by the luck of accuracy, or just the opposite. We will be amazed how they could put in such a short time, this amount of details that we are trying to bring today, because we have more than 200 years of music after that, So, but the problem with Mozart, it's the just to reach an average level, to make it just sound good, is an enormous amount of time, just to make it sound acceptable. So when you want to everything which is above that is actually the higher you want to go, the more time it takes. So when you hear, let's say, accurate performance of Mozart, it's already mind-boggling the amount of work it needs. Well, in other more virtuous repertoire that you were referring to, like Rachmaninoff or Prokofiev or Bartók, which I love so much, well, it's rather obvious the time you need, because it's so you have so many notes to play. Yeah. And so impressive by itself. But with Mozart, it's not, and sometimes it's really depressing, because we were laughing the other day with Gabor, because we are recording, and so we enter into the booth to hear what we just have done. And of course, we are very proud, and we he entered the booth like Kleiber, Carlos Kleiber, and I'm like Friedrich Gulda, and we enter and we listen. And when we go out, I was Bavouzet and he was Takac, we enter like kings, and when we hear, they say, oh, but that's not really what we want. So you have in that case to do this. And now let's start working seriously. But the great thing with this orchestra is that when we start to have this attitude, which I can imagine is not easy to cope with, because we are both very energetic people, Gabor and I, and we are almost unstoppable. And of course, when we are the two of us, it's like a triple energy, but they are with us. Every time we ask more, they do more. Every time we push the limit, they are with us. And I have to confess, I was listening to the C minor concerto last night, which is going to come out soon, Köchel 491 and 503, the C major and C minor. And I was listening and said, it pays off. It pays off.
That's wonderful. That really is. Well, this is absolutely wonderful. Well,
if you want to know exactly also some of the project, I started in 2020 a series of a CD called Beethoven Connection. And Beethoven Connection is, it was in 2020, the famous Beethoven year, and I wanted to somehow do something with related to Beethoven, but as I record all concertos and all sonatas, I was thinking, what about the composer who are living at the time of Mozart, of Beethoven, sorry, and that somehow fell in the unknown or less known. And so the great musicologist Marc Vignal, French international specialist of that period, who wrote wonderful books on Clementi and so on, suggested me 4 sonatas, Duschek, Clementi, Hummel, and Joseph Wölfel. And Joseph Wölfel I've never heard of. And he suggested, well, have a look at the third sonata in E major. It's a pure gem. It's absolutely wonderful. And Mr. Wölfel was such a great pianist and improviser that he had even a duel of improvisation with Beethoven. And many people thought that Wölfel was easier to follow, and they liked him better. Of course, now time has proved that Beethoven, somehow stayed, and Wölfel fell in the unknown, probably exactly because he was too predictable. So I will continue this series also and have maybe three volumes of that. And also I'm planning to re-record the complete Ravel piano pieces for piano, for Chandos, because I did it 20 years ago for a German label. It's a good recording, but I would like now to have another sound and another approach.
And you have a performance of the G major concerto coming up soon, or?
Oh yes, well, actually, a couple of days I go to Australia. Yes, it will be my 120th performance, I think, of the G major, and some recitals in Australia, and right after that, a kind of Debussy festival where I played in 2 recitals, the complete preludes, Image, and some other pieces, and I continue my series at Wigmore Hall, which is a series of 12 concerts around Debussy, with Debussy as a center, but with gravitation of the composer, like the Wind Quintet of Albéric Magnard, and some Fauré pieces, and of course Boulez will be there, Bartók will be there, and so with Debussy you can go 360 degrees in all directions, in the past as well as in the future. So lots of exciting.
That's very exciting. Funny, you mentioned Clementi. About 10 years ago, my wife and I were in Westminster Abbey in London, and we're walking along, and my wife looks down at the floor. She said, "Oh my God, look, it's Clementi." So poor Clementi is down under the floor. Is Clementi. I wanted to get a shovel and dig him up and say, "You poor guy, you don't deserve to live under the floor."
No, but a wonderful composer, and where of course Mozart didn't like him so much because he was, I think Mozart was jealous about his double third that Mozart never wrote because I suspect he could not do it. So of course Clementi, who was a brilliant technician, is full of these things. But it's great music. Oh, the sonata I recorded in A major. It has. I think it was a source of inspiration of Beethoven for his Opus 101. The 2 sonatas are so much connected. And the Clementi was written before. No, wonderful composer, Clementi. I had the privilege to discuss that with Vladimir Horowitz back in '85. Yes, and he adored Clementi. Absolutely, he was one, if not the only one, pianist of his of such a fame to put Clementi in the program at that time.
Right.
Yeah, he did a great deal for Clementi, and his recordings are amazing.
I'm glad we agree on Clementi. I love Clementi's music.
Very interesting music. Yeah. Rather little intellectual, but that aspect I quite like. I mean, a composer definitely interested in a lot of contrapunct, canon. He loves canon. Clementi loves canon. And also technically challenging.
Yes,
so you will hear in future more Clementis.
Okay, let's hope. So I should let you get back to your day.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to discuss with you, Barry.
Yeah, this is wonderful. This is I think this is not only an interesting interview, but I think this is an important interview. I think this is wonderful.